Hi, everyone. We are talking to another one of our partners today. In this case, it's the amazing organization OneTeamGov, which is a global movement trying to radically reform the public sector through practical action. OneTeamGov has members around the world, and we're thrilled that some of them are going to be joining us at Forward 50 on November 10th. Yes, I said 10th. In the past, we've said that Forward 50 is November 3rd to 9th. But the amazing thing about having a platform with a broad tent is that we can bring in lots of partners, and we are thrilled to add OneTeamGov to that list of partners. I've got a few people here with me from OneTeamGov who I'd like to welcome on, and we're going to chat a little bit about what the heck OneTeamGov is and what you're planning on doing on November 10th. So, hi, everyone. How are you this morning?
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning. Good evening.
Where are you, Bonnie?
In Australia, here in Sydney.
All right. And Beth, where are you?
I'm in Halifax.
And David?
I'm in the UK, in a village called Croxley.
Wow. And Joanna?
In Ottawa, Ontario, Canada.
So true to your name, we all had to work our calendars to get into one place at the same time. Thank you all for being here across many time zones. I'm going to start out by asking, for those people that don't know OneTeamGov, I mean, you say you're working to radical reform, but your principles are optimism and a desire to do things better, which is like the least radical sounding manifesto out there. Bonnie, maybe you can start. What is OneTeamGov?
I think it's a lot different than what people expect it to be, especially from the UK. We work very differently because we're a lot smaller here in Australia. For us, it's a small step to start having meaningful conversations about how we can do more and do better for our customers, which are our citizens, our public. That hasn't obviously been the traditional way of doing policy, hasn't been the traditional way of doing government. So we're really trying to bring that conversation to people who are policymakers, people who are strategic thinkers, to make them think about why they're doing the projects that they're doing and who they're trying to impact, to bring that customer voice to the center.
David, Bonnie said that the UK was a bigger movement. Can you maybe talk about the roots of OneTeamGov there and why maybe the public sector has not necessarily been as customer focused as it should have been?
OneTeamGov started. It started everywhere at the same time, but it grew from the UK. It started in 2017. We held our first event, which is an unconference, and we then, which was at the time around bringing both policy and delivery and operations closer together, and it really grew from that, I suppose, with the notion that it's connection first, so connection and small action, which will reform the public service rather than it being big announceable things. Yeah.
Beth, you've been in both sides of Canada. You said you were in BC and now you're in the Maritimes. Is the connection between OneTeamGov simply at the national level, or is it between all levels of government? And like, how does it span the sort of the silos that are traditionally a part of any ministerial structure?
It's definitely global. One of my favorite things is when New Zealand or Australia is on the call and their kids are heading off for school after summer break and my kids are home on a snow day. I've had calls like that before. I do want to go back and challenge the notion that you think that optimism isn't radical, because within giant bureaucracies, it truly is. And so, this notion of radical candor, of caring deeply and challenging directly, for me, that's what drew me to this movement. And when you're from a small jurisdiction like I am, sometimes you might be the lone person kind of feeling that way. And so the beauty of the global community is that you can connect across oceans with people who really are approaching work the same way that you are. And when you're having a down day, you can literally hop on a call and have a conversation that changes your whole outlook and gives you the sort of the gas in the tank to keep going with the things that are hard, because bureaucracy is hard.
Absolutely. And I think as something that Joanna showed us when she got on stage, there's a certain kind of radical enthusiasm that we've always seen from the first moment she came to the first Forward 50 and just sort of rolled up her sleeves and got to work. It almost sounds like therapy. Joanna, do you want to talk about that?
It kind of is, actually. So we started in Ottawa to kick up a little chapter. It was very simple because we could just look at the UK and say, hey, they've done this, it works. It seems radical, although maybe the techniques have been around for a long time. It's just that nobody's brought it to the public service and tried to get people together in this way. And we had meetups every other Wednesday. Because I decided this is something that I could take on. I couldn't do it every week, but I encouraged people, if they could, to try doing the same thing whenever it worked for them. And the interesting thing about that, sometimes the groups were 2 people, and I said, what's the worst that can happen? You have an amazing dialogue with one person. Sometimes the groups were 35 people. And more than anything else, people would come and say, this feels like therapy, because I was able to be here in the safe space and talk about the things that either bothered me or I didn't know where to go to in my own regular structure. But I came here, I felt no judgment, I felt welcomed, and I can go ahead and talk about these things that are bugging me, and people would listen and give me advice. And it really does feel a little bit like that. And I know that has continued virtually in the past 6 months, and hopefully we'll be one day able to have in-person gatherings again.
So there's this sense from many of the public servants I've met over the last few years since we launched Forward 50 that they know things could be better. I've never met a person who says, I really want to mess up the bureaucracy. Everybody wants to make the world a better place. They got into this, sometimes thankless and backbreaking work to make the world a better place. Although they might disagree on what the word better means, they're all well-intentioned. But lately, there's also this sense that we have to figure it out, that there's nobody coming, it's up to us. So I see a lot of the people I've met who are affiliated with OneTeamGov have that attitude of like, well, no one's going to do it, so I guess I should do it. As opposed to no one's going to do it, so it isn't important, or no one's going to do it, so it isn't my fault when it fails. Maybe Beth, you can start now. How do you get that mindset to change? How do you make the organization sort of take accountability and ownership instead of resignation?
Ooh, that's a juicy one. Well, I think you kind of, it's funny because your question was like, how do you, but then you started talking about accountability and ownership within an organization. And I think that is the sort of the radical piece of this, is that you're accountable for you and your actions. And so if you see something that you think you could help, you don't go looking for permission, as long as you're staying true to your public service values and not, creating a huge risk for an organization. Most of the things that we're talking about are just small, simple, practical things to just start. And I find in my own public service, there are people that have a lot of horsepower. They think about stuff a lot, and they've just been sitting, waiting for someone to say, here's the giant project. Now it's your time, your turn. And the reality is that those things don't come along. And so what I love about OneTeamGov is that the whole ethos is, just start. I mean, the other day it was like, oh, who do I send my bio and my picture to? Do I need to? And then I realized, wait a second, this is OneTeamGov. I just take care of it myself because I'm accountable for my own commitments that I've made. And so I really think that a lot of what we're doing is just showing that that's possible and that bad things don't happen if you just go for it. And when you see another OneTeamGov in Australia or in New Zealand or in the UK do something, you're like, hey, yeah, let's try that. There's like a little proof of concept. And the beautiful part is that then you might take it to the next level and someone else is going to benefit from that.
It almost seems like this feels like a mix of scouting and, a secret society like the Masons. Do you have a secret handshake, Bunny?
Oh yeah. Oh no, we're all over it. Don't you worry about that.
In a more serious vein, one of the things that's been amazing, one of the upsides to the fact that we've had to do a lot of this here virtually has been the conversations I've been able to have with people. So I talked to Kathy Swayushi Roy, Kathy Pham, and Catherine Benjamin about product management in public service. And one of the things that came up, I asked some question about AI, and they all just laughed at me and said, why would you worry about that right now? There's so much low-hanging fruit that the government doesn't have to be on the bleeding edge. You can just look at cloud computing and go, well, that's been around for 10 years. What's working? Let's do that. And Beth, you just mentioned that you see these opportunities and take them. Bunny, has it been your experience that even that low-hanging fruit is something that most people aren't willing to reach for because of the institutional backgrounds?
Yeah, look, it's a hard conversation to have with people, especially when you're a young professional. So I've only been in the government for 2 years, and every time I came across a project, I was like, why are you doing it this way? Why this? Why this? Why this? Always asking why. And people would just never have an answer for you. They would never understand why exactly something was happening and why it wasn't happening a different way. And so I think the public service for me, for a time being, really lost something. I lost a lot of faith in the public service and how people were hired, and I got really angry. And I think that's partly what drew me to OneTeamGov, is to try and get some of that passion back. Because we lost a lot of people who were able to ask why and not find any repercussions for it. So for us, accountability is a major thing, because it's a core public sector value in our state, and it's just never, I don't know, it's so hard to keep asking why, and for people to give you a genuine answer that they understand and can back. So even the low-hanging fruit, everybody's trying to push forward with AI strategies. I mean, I worked on the AI strategy, so I know. And even cloud, I worked in cloud, so I know we're all trying to push forward. But I think funnily enough, from a minister's perspective, there's a little bit of a push to make things better. And there are people trying to keep asking why. They sometimes succeed, so sometimes they don't. Yeah.
So David, another great conversation I had a chance to have was with Paul Glover, who is the president of Shared Services Canada. So Shared Services Canada is basically a single provider for all the technology infrastructure, much more consolidated. So things like clouds can be shared across departments. It's pretty good. And Paul is very interested in risk, because his job is to balance the speed that comes from moving fast and not being overly cautious and prepared, versus moving too slowly and deliberately and delivering value far too late for it to be useful. And one of the things that came up was the fact that we haven't properly internalized the shift from analog to digital. When I have a battleship, it's very expensive to launch an update to the battleship. I have to ship a new battleship, and I can't really roll back to the earlier battleship. When I have a service, I can test something out, I can do split testing, and I can roll back by changing a file system. And so the calculus of risk changes dramatically when you have an undo button for your work. And digital gives us an undo button. And so to Paul, he adamantly feels that, and he was extremely candid about this, that we need to reevaluate the sort of calculus of risk now that we have essentially an undo button. You can type more freely. When you had a typewriter, you thought about your words before typing. In a word processor, you can type. If you don't like what you did, select the paragraph and delete, or copy and paste, right? It's much more fungible. Is the shift to digital and the fact that we are now on the wrong side of the right risk balance a factor in OneTeamGov sort of rising globally like this? It's a terribly leading question, but I could just say, talk about digital and how it's affected you.
Possibly. So there's a thing for me about the digital enables us to do things that we could do in the past, but enables us to do them as we have done in OneTeamGov, to do them on a global scale. Now, that just wasn't back in the day before digital. That really wasn't possible. Well, when I started 20 years ago in the civil service over here in the UK, I did have my own computer. I do remember that, but it was a very big thing that sat on my desk. And I was still lots of bits of paper inside paper files, and it was analog. The thing I think that OneTeamGov does, though, is to actually go back to that slightly and say, well, what is the important thing that we have? And the important thing that we have is control over our language. So though we can press undo, like, what is it that in saying something or implying something through our action that we do? And so in those, or at least for me, and in those conversations that we have, those weekly conversations, it gives a space for reflection on that, really, and the impact that it's having. I also, I was just chatting to someone yesterday about the speed of change that's now possible. My brain is still stuck in a way that I'm thinking about having staging servers and all this sort of different infrastructure, which you're just is not how it is needed now. So, how do I put this? But what is needed is like that change in of ourselves rather than needed as in the digital technology. Everything's going to keep moving. Everything's going to move quicker and quicker at some level, but it's what's happening lower down that you get into as you get deeper and deeper into OneTeamGov.
Right. So you want to, I mean, I'm a pundit for lean startup, which is this idea that you deliver things iteratively and you focus on the minimum viable product. But lean startup doesn't work well unless you also have continuous deployment and DevOps and cloud computing and agile. There's a whole set of sort of ways of building things from product definition all the way through to development and release and testing that are focused on iteration instead of sort of getting it right once and then launching it. Can you talk a little about the impact that digital has had on building this community and how aligned it almost seems like OneTeamGov is the cultural fit for those things I just described? You're there. Hi, Ioana.
Hi. Okay. So yes, in a sense, I'm going to try to sneak back into the previous.
That's fine.
Question.
Presidents do it. We can do it too.
Just kind of moonwalk it back here. Simply because honestly, the shift to digital requires a huge buildup of the analog. And by analog, I mean the carbon copies that you see here virtually. And that is what we're trying to do, really. We're taking care of our analog beings because I believe, honestly, that we don't do that enough. And this is what we've noticed over and over and over again. So David has said, OneTeamGov started in the UK in 2017. Since 2017, people have told us over and over again how much they need this for their analog beings. They need connection. They need to be able to feel like they're part of something. They need to be able to break boundaries and silos. And digital tools can help us. But what's really missing is that foundation for just being human beings and connecting. And I think that's what we're trying to do any which way. This is what we're trying things like on conferences, which again, people, they freak out. Honestly, I was laughing quite a bit when I said, let's bring on conferences to Canada in 2018. On conferences and in liberating structures, techniques to get people together and decide things together and build consensus have been around for a very long time. 30 years, these things have been out. We just don't seem to know how to do them. So we're always racing to the next beautiful, shiny thing. And I love clouds and I love AI and I want a bot to take over my job. I tell my boss this all the time. But the analog, and I call it analog cheekily, right? I'm talking about the human part of things. The messy part of things is what we seem to forget. Humans are not robots. We will never be efficient. So we have to figure out how to work together to actually get this stuff implemented. So that's to me, I'm really quite taken with that point.
I love that idea that if humans will never be as efficient as algorithms, we can certainly figure out how to make them more effective than algorithms by humanizing our interactions. That's a really interesting way to look at it. Okay, so let's talk about Forward 50. As you know, big conference. We're a little insane for having done this. First of all, it starts on November 3rd. There's some other stuff happening that day. We are welcoming the digital nations, a bunch of different organizations, Apex, the Code 4 movement. And we were thrilled to be able to reach out to OneTeamGov and say, hey, we have this platform. Would you like to do something on it? Because we are trying to make Forward 50 into this annual sort of big tent gathering for people who believe that digital government and the public sector can make the world a better place. Ioana, let's start with you. What are you planning for November 10th?
So I'm going to tell a story because it just works better that way. I loved it when you reached out to me. I was so super humbled and grateful for that. So I immediately said, oh, there's no way I can take this on alone. Let me just put a couple of feelers out and see who wants to put their hand up. And that's literally how this works, right? This is how it works every time we do anything OneTeamGov. We just reach out to our networks and say, hey, anybody is interested, wants to take this on. It was a little bit scary to have complete freedom of the space and say, hey, do whatever it is that you do without direction. So it really does empower us, but also makes us have to work a little bit and think a little bit about what is valuable to people. And we started brainstorming with a few people who said, yeah, okay, I have some time and space to do this. And I was taken back actually to a conversation that I had in line waiting for co-check at Forward 50 last year. And it was with Ruman Carter from the government of BC. And it was really funny because in the line, there was Natasha Clark was right behind me. Ruman was right in front of me. So we started talking about collaboration and wondering why it is that when there's a crisis, we can sort of all pitch in and forget that we have hierarchical and geographical boundaries and silos and get together and do something extraordinary. I'm going to use the response to the pandemic, right? Everybody just kind of got together and started pitching in on a much smaller scale. When we have something that we want to do, we ask everybody and everybody pitches in. So we seem to collaborate when we're in a crisis, but we don't seem to collaborate on a regular daily way of operating. So that's really challenging. So we're trying to get at why don't we do that? How do we do that better? What's lacking? What's missing? So we figured what better way to do this, but start a conversation and try to get towards some sort of playbook that allows us to collaborate. And Bonnie has some really amazing questions. Says, are we asking the right questions? Is it really how to do it or why we're not doing it? So we're going to start exploring some of that and try to get at the heart of how we can actually collaborate on a regular basis and not just when there's a crisis. So that's one part of it. And I'll let somebody else speak about the second section.
Sure, and I was going to point to Beth next. So Beth, you work at the provincial level and the municipal level. You've worked at a bunch of different tiers of government. Is this, and one of the things that we did last year with Forward 50 was we added this thing called the Regional Digital Government Summit, where we invited the digital leads from each province and state and territory. We're doing it again this year. California and Georgia are involved. Can you talk a little bit about One Team at the regional level and what you're bringing to the Forward 50 event this year? I mean, it's not just federal, even though it's largely a national government event.
I can't speak to what Nova Scotia officially is bringing because I'm just here as a OneTeamGov member. But it's interesting that, like Ioana mentioned, Natasha, who was probably very newly minted Chief Digital Officer in Nova Scotia that day at CoCheck. But the thing is that, and we've seen this again in COVID response, the collaboration that we've been able to have with jurisdictions around the world. We just recently started using Notify, which originally came from GovUK, went to Australia, got time zones, came to Canada and got bilingual, and we're using it as part of our COVID response. And so I think what I love about the idea of the collaboration playbook is that what we're trying to do is really capture the wisdom of how this is working now so that it's reusable and other places can benefit from it when they need to pick up something and sort of know where to start, right? So smaller jurisdictions and provinces and territories, some of the teams in Canada are like 3 people. They're just itty bitty. They don't have the time to sit down and codify, their ways of working. And so that's what's really brilliant, I think, about the sessions that we're bringing is that it's really going to allow folks to have something practical that they can walk away and use at the end of the day. And that's what little smaller jurisdictions with very nascent teams really need.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that we realize in talking to people in government is that there are people in every department who want the world to be a better place, who are doing things like, well, I built this Google form, and if you'd all just use it, we could all go home at a regular time, and nobody listens to them. They're like, I want to believe, I know I'm right, please help me. And so we actually decided this year to do this regional access program, where we are giving 2 passes to any municipality, territory, province, or state that wants them. They just have to go to our website, and under the tickets page, there's an option for regional access. And so one of the things we're hoping is that when you have OneTeamGov members like this who work in governments around the world, they can just go to that page and grab the 2 tickets that are available to their region. Because while Forward 50 does have to break even, we figured this is an amazing year to welcome people virtually, since the incremental cost of another attendee or another partner is not huge. What would look like success for you, Bonnie? I know we kind of threw this together at the last minute because we can do so, but if a month later someone's talking about this thing you did around Forward 50, not just attending the conference as a whole, which we're glad that the OneTeamGov members will be able to do, but participating in your thing on the 10th, what would, you're doing the next call afterwards, what would success look like for you?
Yeah, look, I think it goes back to the two topics that we're covering. If those conversations continue to happen both at a national level for us and at a state level for us, that would be massive. We often don't have a lot of OneTeamGov events, so if those conversations can happen within agencies across the nation and across the state, that would be a lot, because we're covering two really, really big and really important issues. And everybody tries to collaborate, everybody wants to collaborate, like Joanna said, but they just don't. And there's always fallings out because of egos or whatever it is. So if it leads to more collaborations and people really understanding why collaboration is key in every project, and the second session, which is all about diversity and inclusion, if it leads to having more representation, more people that look like me at senior leadership levels, more people that are representative of our nation, our multiculturalism, then I think we really have succeeded in delivering our goal.
So stuff's happening on the 10th. How can people get more involved in OneTeamGov? David, do you want to field this one?
There's a Slack, which is about the best way if you want to find anyone else in OneTeamGov. There's Twitter, which is each sort of place has its own. You can go to @OneTeamGov first and then find all the others if you like. I don't know if everyone else wants to give their own, each individual ones. And that's it. Just lean in. Just find someone to talk to. You've now got 3 Twitter handles who you can find people. So just go for it.
It sounds like you're all pretty eager to welcome new blood into the movement/cult/collective therapy session. Thank you all for trying to make government a better place. And Joanna, I really like that point that as we embrace digital, particularly when we're working at a distance, the human connections that make us effective are far more important and less thought about than the sort of ruthless efficiency that comes from digital analyzing everything and measuring milliseconds and so on. So thank you all for the work you do. I really appreciate it. And thank you all so much for, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks ago that we decided we might do this. And we literally haven't told people like, hey, we're doing this OneTeamGov thing. And now we're telling everybody. So this is a great way to announce that. Really looking forward to seeing OneTeamGov folks all up in our platform. It's a huge platform. We've got 5 channels running for a week of content. And we hope that folks will find it useful. So thank you all very much for getting up early or staying up late, as the case may be, to join us. And we can't wait to see you in Gulp 2 weeks' time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much
for doing this.
All right. See you all soon.